Hi, welcome to my presentation. I'm Lucinda Bliss. What I'd like to do to introduce myself to you today is share with you an exhibit that's currently up at Whitney Artworks in Portland, Maine. In addition to current work of my own, you'll see some work by Lydia Badger and Patricia Brace. I won't have time to discuss their work very much, but perhaps as you're viewing my work as I'm discussing it, you'll be able to make some connections with work by the other artists in the show. Before we begin to look at the work a little bit more intimately, I'd like to just set a context for viewing this presentation that I hope will make some connections with your study planning process. You've probably heard from many faculty that the beginning of any study planning process is generating the important questions that are going to drive your inquiry. And that's true with developing a body of studio work too. There are often sort of base questions that generate a body of work. And what happens next is that those questions need to exist within some sort of a structure. For you, that maybe is the study plan that you're developing. Now you're developing a structure. When creating a body of artwork, you'd want to think about creating a sort of framework to work within. It might be a restriction in size, it might be a conceptual restriction, but I'd like you to think about this idea of coming up with a sort of boundary within which to work. There's a film that I often recommend to students called The 5 Obstructions, which is wonderful for illustrating this point. It's essentially an intellectual duel between two filmmakers, Jürgen Leth and Lars von Trier. And in the film, Lars von Trier sets up a set of 5 different obstructions and asks, or sort of forces, Jürgen Leth to remake his famous film, The Perfect Human, within each of those obstructions. And so over the course of the film, you get to see both filmmakers sort of squirm and struggle in the artistic process. But it's wonderful for thinking about how to create a sort of box within which to work, which essentially is what you're going to be doing as you shape your study over the next several days. Now we're going to go and look at a series of work a little more intimately. So I'd first like to share this series titled Bandaged 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the genesis for the work. About a year ago, I was asked by an artist and teacher, Todd Bartell, actually a wonderful artist and someone I've been in a critique group with for years, so we knew each other's work and sort of way of thinking about our work very well. And he was curating an exhibit at the Thompson Gallery at the Cambridge School of Weston called Sublime Climate, in which he invited a series of artists to create work about the climate crisis. And that's obviously a concern that has been embedded in my work for quite a while, so I jumped at the opportunity. But when it came to actually creating the work, I found it to be an incredible struggle because of how didactic a task that seemed to make work about one particular social issue. So I labored for a while, unsuccessfully, to create work for that show. And in the end, I took a big bag of plastic toy animals and started going into the woods and on roofs, sort of setting them up in Exodus and shooting photographs of them. And then went back to the studio and began using those photographs as source material for my drawings. What happened is, for about a month, I made a lot of really awful drawings. And what I discovered after a month of laboring is that the work was actually the photography, that the photographs were finished pieces. And since I'm not usually a photographer, I just hadn't been thinking about it in that way. But something that emerged out of that exploration that is really relevant in all of the work I'm going to share with you today is this idea of play in art practice. And play not as a sort of light, superficial art action, but play as a means for actually thinking about significant concerns, such as the social concern of climate change. So that was the context for this next body of work that I've been exploring over the last year. And so as you're looking at these 3 different series that I'm going to share with you today, keep that in mind, how I'm using play to discuss serious matters or to speak to serious matters. So, in addition to that being the genesis for this work, another thing that happened is I had a dream about deer. And you'll see in several of these pieces, there are images of bandaged deer. And what happened is in the dream, it's a very detailed narrative dream. I was visiting my mother in Arizona, who is the poet Allison Deming. And we were in the dream going out for cocktails. And on the way, my mother said to me in my dream, I forgot to tell you, I quit my job at the university. She's a teacher at the University of Arizona. And I've become poet in residence at the hospital. And I was surprised. I said, I can't believe you didn't tell me that you're a poet in residence at the hospital. That sounds amazing. So she said, we just have to stop by so I can check in with the head nurse on our way out to get drinks. So we proceeded to pop into the hospital and walked in the door, and there were just piles of injured people everywhere, just kind of stacked up and looking miserable and dark. And then, as we're standing there speaking with the nurse, I looked down on a small coffee table and saw that there were miniature kitten-sized deer with these sort of bloody little bandages around them, sort of looking up at me. And in the world of dreams, I said, "You actually take animals here too?" And the nurse then explained to me in the dream that they developed a technology for miniaturizing animals so they could make room for them in the waiting room. And then they would expand them again when it was time to, for the veterinarian to see them. So obviously such a vivid narrative dream. Maybe that emerged out of the work I was doing for Sublime Climate, I don't know, but certainly the dream fed back into this body of work that you see here, and the idea of bandaged animals. Seemed a way to both speak to the environmental crisis and to speak to more anthropomorphic concerns about healing and woundedness. Now I'd like to take you to the other side of the gallery and share another series with you that also deals with this idea of woundedness.